Hey guys, OGalbina here, bringing you guys something a little bit different today. If you guys don't know, our BBR season ended a couple weeks ago, as well as our WPF. We took some pretty brutal losses in semifinals to both to John Jr., which is definitely unfortunate, but I figured it would be kind of a cool idea to go over our seasons, mostly our teams and the Pokemon, and how I thought they performed, and kind of reflect back on the seasons, because I think there was a lot of really high points and there was a lot of really low points for me, and I figured it's a good way to continue to grow as a player and as a person to kind of look back on those things and go, how would I adjust and do things differently next time, or even just, the reflection part is pretty fun. So I don't know, let me know if you guys enjoy this type of video. Drop a like if you do, and sub to the channel. We're on our way to 3,000 subs, and I would really appreciate it if we got up there before the end of the year. And yeah, it would help me out a ton if you dropped a sub. But yeah, before I jump into it, I do want to give big shouts to both my front office as well as Goons, and really anybody who helped me out throughout the season. My front office was incredible as always, and you can always join that by joining our Discord server in the description below. I got a ton of help from Goons like Dell, Amel in some weeks especially. I think me and J-Bear and T-Row mocked a couple weeks. And then other big helps were people like Shuckle King, people like Joey, Pokegame really helped out a ton. Addison helped me out a ton for my quarterfinals game against Keegan, which was like such a clutch help. So big thank you to everybody who helped me out there in BBR as well as WPF. I had a little bit less of a time like a focus on WPF this season as a whole, and we'll get to that when we talk about WPF later and things like that. Not that I didn't try, obviously, because I did, but I felt like there was definitely less focus on that aspect of the season. But yeah, with that being said, we can kind of jump into it. I did want to just talk about our BBR team at first. You can see it right there. You can see the kill deaths as we kind of talk about these guys and kind of jump in between tabs. I'll adjust this when we get there, obviously, but we can kind of talk about how these Pokemon performed in my eyes, and how well I think they did and things like that. So I think it'll be definitely interesting. First up is going to be Chien Pao, and I mean, I love this thing. I've used it multiple times. It really is an incredible Pokemon. I'm actually really curious to see how many kills I have with Chien Pao all time. I think I've only used it a couple times, and it's really only been in tournaments other than this. Let's see. We're going to go over here. Control F. Chien Pao is 25 and 8 for me all the time, so it's done really well for me. I definitely don't dislike the Pokemon at all. It's really dependent, though, I feel like, on finding that position to get it in. And I felt like a lot of the times my team was 100% reliant on them. We'll kind of talk about that more as we go into like Pokemon like Enamorus and things of the sort, which is going to be next. Enam, 18 and 5. This Pokemon was by far the MVP of the team. It actually did much better than Chien Pao, and after using it this season, I realized we had it very underpriced, and 2, realized this thing with Terra is absolutely broken, and it should not be allowed to Terra. I mean, it was one of those Pokemon, a lot like Bundle, where even in a league that only allows 2 Terra types like BBR is doing, Fairy and Ground is really all I need. I don't need much else. Now, I guess like having a different Terra typing in other matches would be cool. Maybe like a Water or like something like that. But really, Fairy and Ground was completely fine. I ripped through teams that had good Fairy resist with Terra Ground very often, especially because those are Poison Steels typically. And Terra Fairy, honestly, 2-hit KOs a lot of Steel types. I remember seeing that like Scarf Moonblast can 2-hit KO some Goldangos with Terra Fairy, or I think it was like Modest Specs 2-hit KOs like Spadef Goldango after a Spike or something like that. So it was like an incredibly fun Pokemon to use. Its one downside is it not having U-turn, it being the only genie without U-turn. I think this Pokemon had U-turn, it would be certified like top 5. Genuinely top 5, or even just Baton Pass in a draft league setting. Being able to Baton Pass out with your Enamorus and get into another such breaker would be incredible. We can talk about Corviknight next. Actually, man, I was never a big Corviknight fan back in Generation 8, but especially this gen, I really didn't enjoy it. Now, in the games it did come, in 5 of them, it served as an incredible pivot, right? It really did serve as an incredible pivot, getting in and out, U-turning and getting my offensive threats in, but in a metagame where, like, balance in these fat Pokemon really aren't very good and tend to get very overwhelmed, the Roost nerf, things like that, and honestly felt like Corviknight was kind of a liability in a lot of matchups, and I couldn't ever run Roost, or ever click Roost or anything like that. Use its defensive typing and bulk to, prolong these games or, check things long term, because everything's so inherently offensive, especially with Terra, especially with the crazy Pokemon that have been added, that it really just was not worth roosting as one of those big threats came in and then not switching into that thing. The biggest example being in which against my game against J. Ricky, where granted I had a terrible matchup, but I physically could not run Roost on my Corviknight because I was never clicking it, and missing out on an attack meant I could have lost. So it was a bit tough to use Corviknight, in all honesty, and I don't know how likely I am to draft it again, to be completely honest with the season. It was very, very disappointing for me. Then we have Glimmora. I know it says 3 and 9, which looks like a terrible stat spread, but this Pokemon came to every single game we played, and it did its job in every single game. Whether that be Assault Vest variants, which we ran multiple times, or whether that be Spiking variants, whether it just be attacking variants, offensive Glimmoras and things like that, exerting pressure, the prospect of T-Spike, just corrosion sets with a weakness berry or something similar. This thing was absolutely incredible for me. I mean, you can see in our box right here for our BBR. Obviously, week 1 and 2 are not going to be there because I didn't have it. But in this game, we brought like a cool weakness policy set against Jack. Didn't work because we got our ass kicked. Against John, first time. Pretty simple, corrosion, pretty offensive set. So we were bringing different things each time. We brought a Toxic Tech Black Sludge set against oh no, that was the wrong team. We ended up going Spike Sack against J. Ricky. See, I built 2 teams for that one. And then Focus Sash lead on this one because Slacking had no removal, and getting up that 1 spike was a game changer. Against J-Bear, again, Focus Sash lead because it did really well. Against Ruby, AV, I think we were in AV in a ton of the last of our games. Yeah, AV in 2 of the last 3. And then just a simple Black Sludge set again against John with Corrosion in semifinals. But it really did always do its job, and I was always super happy with Glimmora. This Pokemon I could draft almost on any team. I think it fits well on any team, and it's really obnoxious for a lot of teams. Next up we have Aloe. I mean, I'm a big Aloe hater, and this season was no different. This thing is really hard to bring, and it really forces you to build and play very specifically with it. It was like the problems I had with Corviknight, but amplified to the umpth degree. I know I ended up bringing it more because I think my team kind of structured in a way where I had to bring it more. But yeah, like, a good example is the first John matchup, right? Where he had Walking Wake. And this was, like, my only real water resist on top, like, Water Dragon, like, check. And 1, I had to be AV or I couldn't take the hits. But 2, I could never click an attack because I was going to just boost up that Annihilate. I couldn't go Chilling Water sets because of the Defiant. I really couldn't attack into anything. Even something like, hit a lot of his other threats could come in and just kind of deal with me accordingly. Things like Zapdos. I kind of always was forced into spamming Mirror Coat or making an aggressive double out because it was such a liability whenever it touched the field. And I feel that way pretty strongly about Alomomola because a lot of things can just kind of stuff it and be a douche to it. Next up we have Hisuian Typhlosion, and I only had to bring this to 1 game, and that was against that Sun match that I was talking about against Sean. And it popped off. It did really well. I really wish I could have fit on more teams, but I think the way my team was structured, and we'll talk about it at the end, really didn't allow for Hisuian Typhlosion to do as well as I would have wanted it to. I brought in a lot of mocks. It did a lot of really cool things in mocks. I brought like a physical version of mock against John for semifinals too. And I think against, what do you call it? Why am I blanking on his name? Dr. Slacking. I originally had like a physical set, or it might even been J. Ricky, because I think he was the one with Hydreigon. I'm not sure. But regardless, I like the Pokemon a lot. I would love to use it again. But on the team that, is structured a little bit better around it. Goodra actually pleasantly surprised me. I've always been a big Goodra hater, not a big Goodra guy, but this season in particular, it typically came in like an AV setting, maybe Resto Chesto, maybe Boots. I think we were in a Jetpack 1 week. But in those games, it did really well, and it always sponged those special hits that it needed it to. Mudsdale, 0-2 in 2 games. He did his thing. It's really weird only bringing your ground type to 2 games, so I will say. But we didn't play a lot of things that really required Mudsdale to come, but I played in other leagues where Mudsdale was coming, half of the games instead of just, 20% of them, so not too bad. Next is the most disappointing Pokemon of all time. Legitimately, at least this season in particular, was Slitherwing. I drafted this thing, and I thought it was going to be amazing with Chien Pao and Amherst. I thought this offensive core was just going to massacre teams. Slitherwing bringing in those 2 offensive threats very often. The issue is, I could barely ever bring it. I only brought it to 5 games. The game in particular I think he did the best was against Drewby. and other things ended up getting kills, but I brought Bandits to the wing in that game, and it functioned exactly how I wanted to. It was strong, it collected U-turn, it had the scary first impression threat, but other than that, every other game, Slithering was usually forced into a more defensive role. In finals, it was max Fizz Def with a Mental Herb and Will-O-Wisp, which was a cool set. I was actually pretty happy with that, because we did call the taunt Annihilate, so it would have worked against the Annihilate, to be completely honest. But we brought Max Spadef to check Jaybear's bundle. They got blown up by a drill peck, but we won't talk about that. It just never was really able to function offensively in the way I wanted because of its speed tier and how, again, scary offensive this meta is. I don't know, maybe I didn't draft well around it in general, but who knows. Then we have one of my favorite Pokemon to draft in this generation. It's Rotom. I love it as a Scarfer. It avenged a lot of these top-tier scary threats, a lot of these scary offensive waters, the bundles and the Palafins of the world that aren't running Scarf themselves, or Booster, I guess. But really a ton of other things. It was really clutching both the John matchups for Terra Water 8. I ended up clutching up against John. And it also would have, swept Jaybear if we didn't, one, misclick. I don't know if I'm allowed to say that out loud. But one, if we didn't misclick. But two, if we didn't get Bleak Wind Storm drop, they would have clutched up that game, and record would say 7-3 instead, and things like that. But it was a great Pokemon. I love Rotom. I could draft this thing 10 times over. Well, in general, did I like this team? I did. But I think it could have been much, much better. I felt like my team was so unbelievably Chien Pao and Enamorous reliant. And I know that sounds really stupid. You're like, and your team needed, your best two Pokemon to do well. Yes, but to a borderline obnoxious degree, right? If I didn't have a good Enamorous matchup in particular, I felt cooked. I felt really screwed. Because Chien Pao isn't a Pokemon that can really stick around a long time. It's going to come in, it's going to click buttons, and it's going to break. Pokemon like Enamorous, the way this team was structured, it's supposed to be that win con, whether it be with Calm Mind sets, with Contrary sets, with Scarf, with a Specs, just coming in and taking kills and living hits with its natural bulk. If Enamorous didn't have a good matchup, against John in particular, it was probably the worst Enamorous matchup of the season, I felt like I really struggled in the matchup. Same thing with Chien Pao. Chien Pao didn't immediately kill one. I felt like my team could really, really fall behind in the momentum game, because if you look outside of those two, I have Slitherwing offensively, didn't perform as well as I wanted to this season, and that might be on me, but it's also not a top tier threat. Now, what's my next best offensive threat? Goodra? Hisuian Typhlosion? I actually argue Glimmora or Rotom, but my team is very, very much so fat and balance oriented, and I don't like that in a generation like Generation 9. I really don't. The metagame is much too offensive, and I felt like I had to play very aggressively with a very fat team in order to not, lose momentum, and I couldn't really play comfortably on how I wanted the entire season. I really would have drafted this team differently looking back, and gone a much more hyper-offensive route with some things like Chien Pao and Amorous, Slitherwing, things that I could see staying, obviously, are things like Glimmora, things like Rotom, and even potentially things like Corvi. I don't know, I hate him now. I think he sucks, but a steel type like Scizor would have been much better because it exerts offensive pressure when it's U-turning, and it still has that defog aspect. It doesn't get Roost anymore like Corvi does, but I never clicked it with Corviknight. I don't know if I ever clicked Roost with Corviknight this season. If I did, maybe once or twice. You guys can go back and look. I genuinely don't know if I clicked Roost with Corviknight. So I think Scizor just would have been a better pick on this team overall. It had that priority option as well. It seems to just be a better partner for Pao Enem. It really does. I don't know. I think that was the biggest problem with this team, is it had those offensive threats, but then it was very hazard stack balance oriented with Wish Aloe into things like Corvi, Goodra, Mudsdale, Slither even things like Hisuian Typhlosion can function in that way, and it just felt like my team really lacked offensively compared to a lot of these other powerhouse teams with 7 breakers and 6 sweepers. My team felt very slow, and a lot of teams were able to kind of exploit that, and I think John was very much so able to do that in our game with his team and how things ended up going. As soon as we got static paired, I simply couldn't do anything. As soon as my Chien Pao got static paired, I knew the game was over, because that was my only way of legitimately breaking through his team because of how passive the rest of my build was. And I think that's the thing I would change the most about the BBR season. I don't know. That's at least how I see it. I definitely don't regret the season, or I'm really happy with making it to semis. I lost to a great player. But again, given the chance to draft Chien Pao again, which is a crazy starting two. I think I could have done better, to be completely honest. Next up, I do want to talk about WPF, our other Wi-Fi league. Now, early in the video, I said my focus was a little bit more on BBR when it came to preparation. And that's not to slight WPF. I think the league was ran wonderfully. I love the people over at WPF. But I'm sure you guys even kind of noticed it too, and kind of like the drop-off in the quality of my builds and play as the season went on, because the BBR race was so tight. And that's, my home league, my baby. I love that place, right? And the prospect of having to do both of those Wi-Fi leagues at once, it was a little bit stressful. I think I could have managed it a little bit better and split the time a little bit better. But that's one thing I really regret with this WPS season, because I think my team was actually very, very incredible. I think it was a very good team. I actually like this team a lot more than my BBR team, funny enough, besides the top pick. We'll talk about that. But yeah, I definitely think that I should have split my time between the two leagues better, and I know I can. I'm not that busy of a person, right? I work full-time, but I wasn't in school during the summertime. I didn't take any summer classes, so there was really no excuse outside of working and stuff like that. So I don't know. I'm a guy who plays in a lot of leagues at once, so that shouldn't have been too much. But yeah. Now, let's go ahead. We're going to go ahead and go through all of these games, or all of these Pokemon. I am going to save Spectrier for the end. No, I'm going to talk about Spectrier first. I don't like Spectrier objectively, right? Objectively, it is an incredible Pokemon. Objectively, Spectrier is a top 10, borderline top 5 Pokemon. I can't figure it out. Maybe it's that I don't play aggressively enough, because I think I drafted amazing around Spectrier. I think I drafted as good as you can around Spectrier. And then Spectrier ended up being the supporting piece the way I ended up building and playing, where it was forcing a lot of prep and forcing a lot of chip to where my Pokemon like Sneasler and Zarude ended up being my team MVPs, which was, a really, really interesting thing to like see unfold and like notice. I didn't like Spectrier in Gen 8 because I didn't like the fact that it couldn't hit Dark types. Normal types you can kind of muscle through a little bit. You can, Nasty Plot and Dark Pulse or Psychic through them. You can Wisp them and wear them down and make it to where they can't hit you very hard. But Dark types were always a constant problem for it because it simply could not hit them with anything. But with Journey Kiss, I was like, okay, gotta give this thing a shot. And there were some matchups where I was like, man, this thing's incredible. In particular against John, week 9 and in semifinals. He didn't have a normal type, and he had double dark, but I had the coverage for it now, so you'd think it would do well. It really didn't do much in both games. And now, again, looking back on those two matchups in particular, I wish at least in semis I would have brought like either Specs or Colberberry with a Nasty Plot, like a more offensive set, some kind of lure set, just to come in and click buttons more. I think I took a little bit too passive of an approach, and because of that, the Scarf Jugu was able to chip me down, Ranger Scarf Gengar, and that was tough. It sucks, but whatever, not the end of the world. But I do regret that aspect of it. But I think I drafted well around it. I had hazards, I had status, I had momentum and means of getting into it on things that it would like to take on. Sneasler, Zarude, Sandy Shocks, Uxie with that Pokemon seem incredible. And then I had a great Fat Core. We'll talk about those Pokemon. Sneasler, I absolutely loved. It was Terra Sneasler, Terra All Sneasler, and this Pokemon was incredibly fun to build with. I absolutely loved it. By far my favorite Pokemon on this team. It was one off from Kill Leader, but it was really a good time. We brought a ton of Poison Touch sets earlier in the seasons, where we were running like, Boots or Bandit or Scarf or something of the sorts, and trying to, get some cheesy U-turn poisons or some Dire Claw procs and things like that. But as the season progressed, I ended up seeing myself run a lot more Swords Dance variants. Swords Dance, Close Combat, Dire Claw, plus some kind of Terra Blast if you're choosing, is incredibly hard to deal with in conjunction with Unburden. It is very, very difficult to deal with, and a lot of teams didn't really like it. It was very strong against a lot of teams, whether it be Terra Electric, Poison, Fighting, Water, Grass. Let's take a look. I want to see which Terra types we brought from week 4 onwards, at least, right? So, against Will, we brought a really cool Terra Poison SD Taunt set with an Air Balloon. That was really cool. Against Marcus, we brought Choice Band, Terra Dark, Poison Touch, so not a setup set. Then we brought Terra Dark versus Oboe. Again, this time it was Heavy Duty Boots instead. So Terra Dark 2 weeks in a row, which is very good typing on it. Then we brought Terra Electric, Terra Blast against Rose, and ended up doing really, really well there. Against Patmac, Terra Flying with Terra Blast, which is Acro, so really cool stuff there. And then I didn't have it against John that final week anyways. Then against Dashing, it ended up sweeping with Terra Water Terra Blast. No, Zaru did. But it could have won with Terra Water Terra Blast. Did really well there. Against John here, I think I ran Terra Grass with, Terra Blast, for his Rillaboom terrain and hitting other things. Like, I ran a ton of different typings, and it was a really, really, really fun Pokemon, rewarding Pokemon to build with. I would 100% use Terra Sneasler again. Zarude really surprised me. I didn't think this Pokemon was going to be very good, losing access to Darkest Lariat. But it actually ended up being incredible, really because of the addition of Swords Dance and Trailblaze. There was 2 games in particular. One was against Mid, where it absolutely demolished him. In week 2, I don't have that build anymore. And then round 1 versus Dashing, it put in a ton of work with the Clear Amulet. SD said, we got up a bunch of Hazard Chip, Helmet Chip, things like that, whittled things down, and then we were able to go to town with it, which was awesome. Then, Sandy Shocks. I've always enjoyed using Sandy Shocks. Very Glamour-esque Mon. Glamour-esque KD as well. It was 4-9 this season, but it came to 10 games. Only sat out 1 total, which shows how reliable it was. It got up Rock Spikes. It Volt switched around. It might have discharged and gotten some paras or something like that. But really, it was here to set up hazards and be annoying. And it always did that. It really always did that. And you can see it came to every game post... it came to every game post week 3 at the very least. So whatever game I didn't bring it to, weeks 1 through 3. Other than that, I know it came against Brody because it got thumbnail because Focus Ashley went crazy. Maybe it was against Mid or Star. I'm not 100% sure. But it did really, really well. I was really happy with it. Oxy and Sylveon, all reliable. I love those 2. I love them together as well. Sylveon being a great Spidef wall. Oxy typically being a great Fizdef wall that loves wishes from Sylveon. Caparajah only came once. Mostly because the steel typing was kind of redundant on my team and not super needed. It came for an Espathra that it didn't die to, but it was able to get some, very clutch and crucial roars around, despite not really being able to break through the opposing team. So that was a cool aspect of it. I definitely, enjoyed it in that 1 game against Mid in week 2. But obviously it's not a very good steel type. I didn't expect much out of it. Something I didn't expect to do as well as it did was Volcanion. It came to every single game we played, and I loved it. I know it's just 4-8, and I think that's because I was forced to more defensive Volcanion sets because of the team that I drafted. But honestly, that was okay. It got Steam Eruption Burns or Force Covert Cloaks. It Rest Talked a lot. It ran 4 attacks, sometimes more offensive sets, but typically it was like Rest Talk, defensive, annoying sets in conjunction with all my hazards, all the helmets I was running, the burns, the poisons, the paras, all that stuff really adding up. It was an incredibly important glue piece. Braviary came to like that week 9 15-minute build game against Sean. It didn't do awful in that game. I think I still lost the Rillaboom, which it was kind of there for, so that was tough, but oh well, he's a Braviary. Can't expect much. There's probably some matches where I could have bought it and ended up not bringing it. And Nachi Stack never came, unfortunately. He was our cheerleader. I thought about it against John, actually, because I was so Ghost Week, and it also kind of checked non-knockoff Jugu. But I ended up not bringing it. And honestly, maybe that lost us the game, because I actually think it could have done really well now that I look back on it with Salt Cure. Could have been pretty obnoxious, but oh well, not the biggest deal in the world. Overall, like I said, I think this team was structured phenomenally. I think I use Spectrier not to the best of its abilities. And I think it's just a Pokemon that doesn't mesh well with me. And sometimes in draft, you have those Pokemon. The example I always go to is Kurt. Never likes Aegislash. He's tried it multiple times. He doesn't like using it. I love Aegislash. Whenever it's available in a format, I snag that puppy right up. It is amazing. There's some people who don't use Mew well because the plethora of options kind of overwhelms them or whatever it might be. They don't like the low stat base or whatever it might be. But I love Mew, and a lot of other people love Mew. It really does, like, despite a Pokemon being really good, like Spectrier, if it doesn't mesh with how you play or you don't feel comfortable with it, you probably shouldn't use it. And I think I've kind of confirmed that I'm not a Spectrier guy. I just don't use it very well, and I was probably better off getting another, top tier Pokemon. I don't know, but maybe the team wouldn't end up differently, and I wouldn't have loved my team as much. So maybe it was a blessing in disguise, right? Because Spectrier went 5-9 in 11 games, but Sneasler and Zaru went 16-7 and 17-7. So who knows, really? Going forward, I'm going to be playing in the GBU as of right now, which is John's league that he's making. I'm going to be playing in that once the DLC drops, as well as the BBR tournament. I'll link the BBR tournament, signups in the description below. We're still taking applicants and things like that. If you want a chance to try out Wi-Fi without it being upload required, you can do so. other than that, I don't know. I want to get my consistency back. There was little losing streaks that I typically go on. You can see right here, this back half of the season, I really struggled. I started off 4-0 and was demolished in the league. Marcus got me in a pretty close game. I got cooked by Obo. I just played really bad. I beat Rose in a really close one. And then, honestly, it was really just these 2 weeks that felt rough. After this, I felt fine. John was a game that we both weren't really super sweating. Pat Mac, I got hacks to hell and back. And then Rose was a very close game, but it was a good one. And put well against Dashing, and I think I just got outbuilt against John semis. So, and same thing with BBR. I mean, you can see there are just little spurts where I struggle, and it was kind of in this point where I was kind of hitting a little bit of a slump mid-season, but I am very happy with myself in the fact that I was able to kind of wrangle it in and figure it out and go forward. So, I don't know. We'll see, how things go going forward. I think I am improving overall, even if I go through these, small losing skids. I still think I am a very good player, one of the better players on Wi-Fi, and I think my understanding of the game increases when I have these experiences where I end up losing, a little bit more than I'd like to, or end up playing a really shitty game. That's how you get better, as frustrating as it is, but I'm still very confident in, my own abilities, and I'm sure I'm going to bring you guys another Wi-Fi chip here soon. It's got to happen in these next couple. I'm telling you, I'm feeling it. I'm feeling really good about this, and I'm starting to understand and grasp Gem 9 more. Try to get a better draft in GB, one that I'm more comfortable with at the very least. I think my other teams were good. They weren't. At least BBR. It wasn't me. So yeah. With that being said, let me know if you guys enjoyed these WPF and BBR seasons. Let me know if you enjoyed these recap videos. If there's anything else you'd like me to cover in a future rendition of these for future leagues, let me know. But yeah, with that being said, I'll see you guys in the next one. Go watch finals for both of these leagues. Later.